Okay, call the meeting to order of the Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District, September 7th, 2022. First order of business, we have some guests here. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Nicole. I am a student at Hamlin University for the Natural Science and Environmental Education program. I'm just here observing.
Okay. Welcome. Good.
Thank you.
And iPhone 56. Is who?
Not sure.
Who's iPhone 56?
No identification. iPhone 56, if you're available just to let us know who you are, we can record you for our visitors.
This will remain a mystery. Okay, first order of business is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
The agenda.
Second.
Any discussion?
I had a question. There was that email from the Minnesota Drainage Work Group. Is that something we're going to discuss today?
We can,
That's a good,
if you'd like to.
we would have to add that to the agenda, so.
I was curious.
Yeah,
You can, we can also just cover it under manager's comments
I'm
too.
good. I think that's acceptable. I don't know. I read it through and was curious about perception.
okay, we'll do it under manager's comments then, so. Okay, no other comments, call the roll.
Pam,
Aye. Here.
Val,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, that's okay. I think Val, you wanted to remove the minutes, so.
Yeah, if you don't mind removing the minutes, there's a point that I want to be clear.
Okay,
Or removed.
we will remove the minutes, that's fair.
You seconded?
Oh, I did. Second it.
Yeah.
Did I do that wrong?
Oh, wait, if we're gonna remove something.
Yeah, we can't do
We
it.
should remove it first, and then we'll approve it as amended.
Yeah.
So, we want to take the meeting minutes out. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second it.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay.
I had a curiosity on the Medtronic USA spend on the budget. It's for 10K. It didn't click in my head what that was. Or somebody could just remind me. It said device escrow general, McDonald USA LLC.
Oh, McDonald. I asked about that too, and in the packet, I'll ask the question.
Okay.
Because I figured out, I had the same question.
I tried to figure it out.
They closed out a permit for McDonald's, if you look
Oh,
at
that's
that,
what,
and so they're giving their money back.
I didn't think about looking at the permits. That's my fault. Thank you.
And neither did I.
Thank you
I
for
wrote it down.
I didn't find it yet, but yes,
Right,
if it says it's, yeah.
Yeah, it said escrow, so I was like, okay, we're paying it back. I don't
and back
know
where's the
why. I
phone?
don't
That's it.
understand.
Oh,
If you
McDonald.
look in the closed out permits, there's McDonald's.
I thought you said Medtronic. and I was like,
Oh, no,
it's
no,
Medtronic.
no.
Okay.
That would be a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Any other discussion of the consent agenda? Okay, call the roll. for
Okay,
approval minus the meeting minutes.
Aye.
Val.
Aye.
Diane.
Aye.
And Larry.
Aye. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the meeting minutes, and your question is.
It's just, there's a statement I had, and I apologize I didn't get to it because I was on vacation. But it's the sandbagging one. I do not recall saying residents are expected to provide manpower. It was more of a comment in my experience. People have volunteered to help. And so if we could just, it's not a value added statement, we can remove it would be my preference.
So
because I
this
don't
is
think
on the
there is-
last page.
Yeah, page 9 of
About a quarter of the way
the.
down. It says manager, Crystal stated that in his experience of sandbagging is required.
It's that are expected to provide manpower. I think that's not what I was trying to convey. And so I just want to make that clear.
Okay,
So we'll strike it.
yep, we'll take that out. So do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes as amended?
Second.
Call roll.
Pam.
Aye.
Belle.
Aye.
Diane.
Aye.
And Larry.
Aye. Okay, gets us to visitor comments. Does anybody have comments? Do visitors have any comments that they'd like to make? No, you're good. Okay. We still don't know who iPhone 56 is.
No.
Okay. So no comments?
No.
Moving along to the permit program. We have one application from Excel Energy in Maplewood.
Nicole's not here tonight. Paige or Mary, was wondering if you can overview the permit.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. Can you say that again?
Sorry. I was just letting the board know that Nicole wasn't here tonight and was wondering if you were going to overview the permit or if Paige was going to.
I can.
Either one. You go ahead, Mary.
Okay. Yeah, so just one permit going to the board. Let me pull it up quick. For the repairs to the Xcel Energy existing gas plant. So they had some fire code and safety requirements that didn't meet their last inspections. They have some kind of emergency repairs to do. So that project is kind of on an accelerated timeline for those safety upgrades. There is a little bit of a wetland variance request, and that is for truck access. But the improvements to stormwater are meant to be an upgrade from existing site conditions because it's an unsurfaced sediment-laden runoff parking lot. So there will be improvements to the site as far as stormwater management is concerned.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
There's a, described in here, a permanently disturbed 0.29 acre wetland buffer. And I'm just wondering if we could walk through that and like, if we're disturbing 0.29 acres, is it like made up somewhere else? Do we have a policy for that? I would like some information on that.
On the buffer disturbance?
Yes.
Yep. So typically when there's a utility or a like in this case, it's a significant, I would say, safety concern. We have in the past approved buffer disturbance. Most of the time that's temporary. In this case, it's not. But what they're proposing then is that these stormwater impacts would equate to a replacement of that buffer, essentially.
Like all the things they're doing to improve the water quality on site would compensate for that loss of 0.29 acres of buffer is what you're saying?
That's what they're proposing. Yep.
And then what about the wetland? There were 3 wetlands on site and one was deemed something like.
Incidental.
Right, is that going to be impacted?
Mary, do you know, or Paige?
Yeah, the incidental wetland will be completely impacted, but yeah, it's classified incidental, so it was kind of like a man-made wetland.
So to me, I have concerns over this because a long time ago, we went through and we looked at all of our wetlands in our watershed district and we graded them on the quality. And those indicated in red or manage A were the highest quality. And the wetlands being impacted here, even the incidental one, are red on my map. And that's really concerning to me. So it's concerning to me that even though one's incidental, it's being lost entirely. And then it sounds to me like you're saying that this 0.29 acre buffer is being disrupted on another class A or manage A wetland. And that bothers me.
Was it a manage A or was it managed? I don't remember the manage on that.
I think they're all manage A, weren't they,
All
on the
manage A.
site?
Top quality wetlands.
So the incidental wetland is part of the Wetland Conservation Act state law, and they have to meet certain requirements to say that this wetland it's not a historic wetland. It was created either by man-made or I guess man-made would be the biggest thing. Maybe they did some grading on the site that left a low spot. And that incidental wetland, Mary, is the one that's shown on our map. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the smallest
Small one.
wetland there. That's kind of like its own little island there.
Right, and so to me, what's concerning is that, like, when we talk about like needing, we don't have enough places to create wetlands in our watershed district because they're not conducive to making a good quality wetland. And then we have an incidental one here that's manage A.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is a great place to create a wetland where probably there was wetlands before. And so that's lost. I'm just thinking that I'm always worried about our constant loss of wetlands and our inability to create spaces when we have, like we'll talk about in future projects today, about there just isn't space to create new wetlands. And so that's why I have a problem with this one. And I may not vote for it for that reason.
I was looking for the 22-06 decision on that one.
Yeah, that's not something we have. It's part of the record of the permit, so it would have happened, just this year.
Yeah, I think when I remember reading it, it said something about it being decided in July. I
Yeah.
apologize, I wasn't at that in attendance for it. Could somebody
Well, you
just-
wouldn't, so that's a staff approval.
Okay, that was.
Yeah. Yeah, wetland delineation reports are done by staff.
There isn't really any information about the safety issues and the urgency and what other options were looked at to avoid losing the wetlands.
Mary or Paige, do you have anything to add to that?
Unfortunately, I don't know much about the background. I just know, what Nicole said for that urgency. And in our, I don't have much more to say about the incidental. Unfortunately, our rules are we follow like Tina was saying, the WACA guidelines for incidental. So if it's considered incidental, that historically has just been, we follow those state WACA guidelines for saying that's not something that we protect under our current rules, I guess. So that's where that comes into play. Yeah.
And what about policies with regard to, okay, they're permanently going to disturb 0.29 acres of buffer. Do we have a policy in place for, I know we have, like, if we're going to disturb a wetland, to do a replacement on this, blah, blah, blah. Do we have a plan, or you're not able to make this 0.29 acres buffer here, but can you make the buffer there? That's question one. And question two would be, we have this budget to identify places for which we can create. And is there a way for the watershed district to step in and preserve that incidental wetland and create an expanded wetland? Or, I didn't really understand what their construction plans were, but just curious.
I think one caution I would give is that typically in, for instance, gas stations or gas plants, it wouldn't be an ideal location for anything that could introduce, like the pond, for instance, has an impermeable liner so that it can't seep into our groundwater. We wouldn't call this out as an ideal location because of that.
Because there's toxic
because of the
gas
use.
being collected.
I think it's the
or
land
whatever.
use of
Right.
of that site.
It's also concerning, by the way.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Can I, one thing Nicole did cover, and Mary sort of said this too, but currently the water draining through that buffer and into the wetland area is not toxic, but very sediment laden and very dirty. So this would be an improvement, even though it is a buffer disturbance, it is going to be an improvement to the water draining into the wetland.
Can I, so when I read it, because I was equally struggling with some of it, trying to just piece it together, but when I read it a couple times, it sounded to me like the outcome was we want to disturb this buffer to prevent, if spill occurs, it penetrating further in the wetland. Did I interpret that correctly? I was trying to figure it out because I looked at the plans as well, and I was like, I don't understand why they can't avoid it. But it sounds like they wanted to make a slope on it for like like a really bad spill to prevent it further spreading. But if
Yeah,
somebody
I think,
understands-
oh, sorry. I think that is right, Val, and they're gonna add some additional spill containment and protection during this upgrade, yeah.
I understand the concerns that you're bringing up. I think what's leading me to, encouraging you to look at this as a positive thing is because of the land use and the, clearly they're in violation. They need to improve the site for safety considerations. And I wouldn't want to be holding up improvements to safety and for the site. So
I'm just looking under net loss. We keep loss.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that you're keeping track of this and.
we do keep track of incidental wetlands that are approved. We do keep track of that. As far as the buffer goes, they do come to you as part of the permitting process, but only when they're being constructed, right? So if changes to buffers happen outside of our permitting program as well.
So one question I had was procedural, and Lauren, this is kind of for you. The engineering firm on this is Bar Engineering. And Bar Engineering is the one that reviews our permits. Is there, and I'm not suggesting there is, I'm just asking a question. What do we do when that happens? How do we make sure that not like reviewing their own work and saying, that was really a good engineering job, congratulations.
Yeah, Brian, do you want to speak to that? We
Sure.
talked about
These do come up from time to time, Larry, and with many of these, we discuss it with Tina. We make sure that the application form itself is submitted by somebody other than Bar Engineering. Now, we did provide the guidance and the wetland report for this for sure, and help with preparing the guidance on the plan. Having a permit coordinator on staff and other very knowledgeable staff members at Ramsey-Washington has been the, essentially the checks and balances, just to make sure that perceived conflict of interest isn't real. And so that's how we've handled it in the past.
Okay. No, it's not that I thought there was anything wrong, it's just
Right.
that it does sometimes look that way. I know it's
Yeah.
happened before.
Yep, no, that's
Um,
for sure.
Okay. So where do we stand for what does this wetland look like? Is it the little incidental one? Is it, I can look at the map, but I
Yeah.
can't see what it looks like.
Yeah, I haven't seen it myself. Anyone have anything to add to that?
No, unfortunately, I don't know if Mary, if you've been on site, I think Nicole is the only one who has.
No, I wasn't. I just started kind of learning the WACA world with Nicole and just took a course recently, so I hadn't been doing site visits at that time.
But I think she usually reviews it with, oh, sorry, Tina, somebody from the state, Bowser. So they would have walked it with her as well.
Okay.
Yeah, actually the notice of the decision is in the packet. It doesn't give a lot of information regarding, what it looks like, but it does talk about who is on site and including the Bowser representative and mayor.
So Bowser has approved this.
Yep, they're part of our technical evaluation panel. So they see this as well. Yeah.
I agree with you, Pam, on the loss of this, but in this case, as Tina says, there's some overriding issues that have to do with they gotta get the safety in the place. We wouldn't want to say you can't have environmental and community safety because we have a wetlands that somebody dug one time. Now it's on the record books, but we do have to be cognizant going forward that we don't just drill these things away and end up with nothing.
I'll make a note too, I haven't yet, but in my head I did regarding the incidental, it's something we can talk about in our wetland workshop, upcoming wetland workshop, so as a potential policy.
Well, didn't like when Fratellon, when we approved theirs, didn't they like move a wetlands or something like that? I can't remember what you, it's that,
No, they were draining, a low area. I don't know if it was a what. I have to go back. and double check
Yeah, I
on
can't
Yeah.
remember if there was an incidental case.
that. I had a couple other questions on it reads like they're prioritizing this fix immediately. They're going to delay stormwater treatment work.
yeah,
And then I looked down below with the water quality considerations, and both of those were like, the plan's sufficient, the plan's sufficient. It didn't seem to align in my mind when I read that. So if somebody could help me understand and rectify those two, it would be helpful.
I think when we say that it meets our rules, what we're saying is that we allow for the deferment in our rules, and so then it meets that. They have identified a site, they're still determining the feasibility on that, but they've identified something. If they can't complete it as planned, then
They have to pay for it. Well, and I think when I first read it at first pass, it felt that they're managing the spill, they're not managing the water. And so if there was a spill without management of the water, you're still going to contaminate wetlands.
So what they are proposed, so there's two things, there's the wet containment pond, so that's gonna get constructed right away, but that's the filtration.
Yeah, so any other water that doesn't go to that pond that filters through the impervious areas would still kind of flow through. So I think that's where I landed at the end of it. If my assumption is they're building it to prevent further catastrophic spill into other wetlands to disturb that 0.29, I'm comfortable if that assumption is true. I don't like the loss, but that catastrophic failure worries me more. That's where
I'm just wondering if there isn't a way to, this is a site to create wetlands, if it couldn't be explored more, how might one do even better? I mean, if there's, because it suggests to me that if there's an incidental wetland on that site, any extra space on that site might be useful for creating wetlands, and the loss of buffer. I'm just reluctant to approve anything anymore that is a loss. One where we're just giving up, or we have a project where you need to do a 2-to-1 for wetlands and it's going to someplace outstate, or, I'm just to the point where I'm probably never going to approve one again. Just put it out there. I want us to find a different solution. And that will be the reason for my saying no.
this wetlands is man-made, yeah, can't they just move it? Or are they gonna use the whole site? It sort of looks like they're gonna use the whole site.
Yeah, I'm not
There's
sure.
little places here.
I think we don't have anything in place. I mean, certainly if you wanted to make it a condition of the permit, that's not in our rules for incidental wetlands to require that.
But we, as a solution for the loss of the buffer.
I think you're welcome to explore that opportunity. I think it's, I just get nervous about the safety concerns.
And I brought up before that this is, kind of laid out as an exception for safety, but I don't see timeframes in it.
And it's not our job to be safe. They should shut it down if it's not safe.
And they
It's
have
not our job to make them safe for their company.
a 2-year time to do the stormwater treatment. That's not in the special provisions. I'm having a hard time getting wrapping my head around. It's urgent, it's not urgent. How dangerous is it? All that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what time frame they were given, right? So they were given citations for not having everything in place, but I'm looking in here to see if there was any timelines.
Might have been
Listed.
helpful to see the citations and
Yeah, I think,
what they said.
typically we don't get into the details of how their operations work, like it's, but yeah, I can understand what you're saying.
So what do we want to do here?
I'm gonna vote no, if somebody wants to move it.
We need some kind of a motion to go with it. I don't think we have that yet, do it.
No, we'll need a motion, and we'll also, just to clarify, if you're voting no on the whole project or just the variance request. I guess. they go
Okay, I'm
hand
gonna
in
vote
hand,
no.
but-
I'm gonna propose that we vote no on the variance request. I'll propose a motion to do that.
So,
I don't know what that means for the permit, actually, if we.
Or I propose we do not permit this application as submitted to us.
Yeah,
And that's my motion.
is there a way to request additional information with that motion? Is that what you're trying to get to, Pam?
I just am reluctant to give up that buffer. And
I mentioned one thing quick too about the variance request. The existing facilities already are in the buffer, so them impacting the buffer is because their facilities are already extended into that buffer of wetland 3. So they are gonna have to do a variance request no matter what, because their facilities are already in that zone.
And Mary, doesn't the buffer requirement, it's an average so that they could expand that buffer someplace else to knock off that
Yeah,
loss?
except our rules are, it's a no disturb buffer, so that's what they're also, they'd be disturbing it either way, so that's, it would be variance.
So is the 0.29 additional disturbance above and beyond what they're currently disturbing then?
Wouldn't call.
There's no determination, I think, or I guess, I don't know off the top of my head what their current acreage of disturbance of that buffer is, but just from what I can see on that map, that their facilities are already in that buffer. And I also, I guess, I don't know where their property lines are as far as where they can expand into the, what their limits are for expanding into the buffer, because I don't know exactly where that property line would fall.
And we don't consider we wouldn't consider what's currently in place as disturbance because we've changed our buffer rules and things were in place, there's buildings and
So it is.
parking lots in place.
But the base answer is it's an additional 2.9. It's not something that is partial. It's the 0.29.
0.29 is what they need
What
to
they need to.
disturb with their construction, yeah.
Can we ask a question of Bar on this one then?
Sure.
Brad, do you know if there were other considerations in the layout and mitigation of this risk?
I don't know in terms of the layout, but I did talk to Brandon earlier today about, did they look on site for other areas to expand? Were there degraded buffers in other portions of the site that they could propose to enhance in exchange for this loss of buffer? And he said there was a review of the perimeter of the site to look for expansion of buffer, and the site is just so limiting based on the railroad on one side and roadway on another, and otherwise the facility is bumping right up next to it. So there's really not much room to do much else. And I would suggest that you consider, if you do deny this, they would probably go back and try to reduce the size of that holding area for spill response, which may not be big enough, so that might be delaying things from a safety perspective if they try to preserve that 0.29. That's just, I don't know a lot about the design elements of that pond itself, but that's what I would see, because the only reason they're really losing that buffer is to create that storage volume. So it has a number of effects, and I'm not saying you should necessarily approve it. I'm just saying that's something else to consider.
Just to clarify, and it's not necessarily important, but that incidental wetland is not shown on our wetland map. That is wetland 2 that's shown, that little one, that little red one.
Oh, is it?
Wetland 1 would be to the east of that.
I see it on this one.
Right, that was the delineation report. But it's not shown, it was not shown on our wetland.
I'm just hoping they can do something a little better with VAR's help.
My name's Corey Tellers. I'm a representative of Excel, and I'd like to give you guys a little bit of background of why and what we're doing out here.
Is
This
this
facility-
iPhone 56?
Is this iPhone 56?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, could you say your name again and spell it for us so we can have it on record, please?
My name is Corey Tellers, CORYTELLERS.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, I'm a representative of Excel, and this plant was originally built in the 1950s. And what the purpose of this plant was to bank propane so that it could be bought in the non-peak times of the summer and banked. And what it does, it's a peak shaving facility. So in the middle of the winter, when it gets very cold out and the demand for natural gas rises, we introduce propane mixed with air into the supply chain to keep everyone's prices at bay. Back in the 50s, the codes and the variances weren't what they are today. So we're taking an initiative and being proactive and attempting to bring the plant up to current codes. This is a tricky site because it's as you guys know, there's wetlands all around it. It's a wet site in general. So one thing that we want to do is we need to put a new truck loading system in. This truck loading system is going to fill our propane bullets, and then we can move propane to and from the bullets. Code requires that the truck loading facility be 75 feet away from any buildings. It currently is not right now. New code also requires that we be 100 feet away from the right of way at the road. We looked at so many different options of preserving wetlands and trees out there, but with the current footprint of the facility, we were unable to come up with any solutions. We even looked at the solution of rebringing our rail car road system back up to life, but it just wasn't going to be very feasible there. And so we decided to put this truck unloading facility a little bump out. It's going to be on the northwest side of the facility. And we did our best to not impact any wetlands. As of the incidental wetland, it was a relatively wet spring. So when we did the wetland delineation, it was wet in there. There was a little bit of standing water. I'm no expert, but it looks like to me back in the 50s when they did their clearing, grubbing, and grading, the banks just didn't look natural to me, and looks like that's just from the grading of the site back in the 50s. I went out there with Nicole and Tyler from BAR a couple months ago, and we looked at it again, and the wetland was completely, the incidental wetland was completely dry at that point. And that's when it was a deemed incidental wetland. I heard you guys talking earlier about a potential spill and whatnot. Right now, over the past 60 years, just from water running, erosion, whatnot, the site grading is not the best. There initially never was a stormwater plan put into place. So what we're doing is we're doing our best to be proactive. Right now, if there was a spill from one of these liquid propane tanks, it would accumulate underneath the tanks, creating a fire hazard. So what we're going to attempt to do is grade the whole site so the water runs into that basin on the northeast side of the facility. We put in there to do a 2-to-1 slope. 3-to-1's most commonly recommended, but we did a little bit tighter so that we could have the volume for a 100-year storm event and to catch the water and treat it before it gets returned back to the wetland. That's about all I could think of in the design process, but we did look at this very long and hard, and this was the best solution we came up with. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to try to answer them.
Using the wetland one as the new storage pond. Is that fair?
I unfortunately do not have that map in front of me, and my audio is a little bit shaky at this time.
It's in the
What I-
area of the incidental wetland where you're placing the storage
The
pond.
storage pond.
Yeah.
So the disturbance is for that truck loading rule.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The truck unloading is going to be on the northwest side of the facility. So that's, yeah, that is where the clearing and grubbing will take place.
So that change is not to mitigate a spill risk there, it's to comply to new laws and regulations. Or they're not laws, forgive me, but
Yeah.
new code. Okay, then I misinterpreted it.
And I have a question. So I'm just looking at your delineations and to me, it's the loss of the buffer that's bothering me and the fact that these are managed wetlands are the highest quality wetlands that we have. And you've got like this toxic plant right there. And you're asking to remove some of the buffer that we have in our requirements. And is there no way that you can't redesign this to argue that, okay, if I'm gonna cut out this 0.2 acres here, I'm going to create an extra 0.2 acres here on wetland 2 or something, or I'm going to create a new incidental wetland to the west of where we need to do our stuff, so that all in all, we're doing our best to not have any loss. I also see a bunch of trees there. Those are concerning too. Yeah, so many trees left. We just keep destroying them all.
Yeah.
The loading bays are wetland.
Yeah, Corey, did you look at any options for creating buffer in other locations on the site?
Well, I guess I'm kind of confused by that because obviously a buffer is to have, you know, a buffer strip of sort between the facility and the wetlands itself. So by creating more buffer on an opposite side of the wetlands, that's all native areas. And I don't know, I can't figure out in my head how we'd be able to create more buffer by doing that. And to an earlier point, the existing facility is within the wetland buffer already, as rules have changed over time. So by the footprint of the whole facility there, we are kind of constrained about options that we can do there. And to the comment of it being a toxic facility, it's a propane facility. So I don't really think there's really no risk. We're being really proactive. I mean, how propane becomes liquid is temperature and pressure. If there ever was a leak, it's going to vaporize unless it's extremely cold to be able to pool and run anywhere. But at that times we have our emergency protective pond that is going to trip a sensor and close the overflow to capture any kind of release that could possibly happen.
So the incidental wetlands is not in our inventory, it's not a real wetlands, it's a artifact from grading. So we're really not losing anything, although I take your point, Pam, and I.
We are losing something. We're losing that wetland and we're losing a 0.28 of a
So
buffer zone.
what we're-
That's what we're losing.
So with the incidental, right, so we're losing a low spot, but they're building another low, so, you know, so it's not, you wouldn't be losing the.
Oh, wait, tell me about this. They're building another low spot someplace adjacent, or I don't see
So
that
there's
in
the
the.
pond and the
I'm
filtration.
missing that.
In the plans, it's the penetration of the buffer, what appears, I got them backwards. The wide pond
Yeah.
bottom access, I think, is where they're eating into the buffer. And then the incidental wetland, they've turned into the loading. And so I believe, if I'm reading them correctly, that's what I'm gathering. And so the buffer, and somebody smarter in construction can tell me I'm totally wrong, but I'm trying to read the plans. kind of quickly, it looks like that part is all of the fill pond.
On the north or the west side. of
Yeah, it
that.
looks northwest, yeah,
Yeah.
I think we switched the directions in the
says-
conversation.
100-year detention pond,
Yeah.
spill containment.
So then my assumption initially with that buffer reduction is to reduce the risk of a catastrophic spill. And that part, I think I don't like removing it, but removing, like having a pond for the spill makes a lot of sense and you need it.
Right, but I don't think, I mean, that's their problem, not ours. And my problem
get
is
you.
that in order for them to do what they need to do, I'm just not happy with this one. That's for the reasons stated.
So I just add one thing, if you don't mind. Right, so I think as we're kind of drilling down into the details of that, so the pond needs to be in that place because of the location to the facility,
And
which
that's where the
impacts the
tanks
buffer. Pam's concern, I think, is stating, well, if you're disturbing this, can you restore something else on your site? I think what I'm hearing from the applicant's representative is that they be disturbing natural area to create natural area. That it's not like they have a place where they're removing structures or, things that aren't natural. So that's the trade-off. So if you were asking for restoration,
Or if this isn't the right place for them to store propane and then XL decides to pick up and move someplace else, would this be an opportunity for the Watershed District to buy up this property and turn it into a really nice Class A wetland?
except I don't think that's on the table.
No, it's not.
Like it's,
But I'm saying, are we going to permit these variances to accommodate these businesses' needs when I'm here trying to protect the environment as much as I can? And I'm here to protect the environment.
I think the holding pond will protect though. That's kind of where I'm struggling, to be direct. I think on the buffer, they eat that out so we don't have a chance of contaminating wetlands. But to your point, I don't know if it's been looked at, if they shut it down.
I'm just saying a loss of Class A wetlands. That's what I see. I look at this and I see, there we go. There's some more red wetlands that are going to be deleted.
but the
And that's what I'm
wetlands,
saying.
in this case, the wetland's not being deleted, it's
The buffer
the buffer.
and the incidental wetland that just happens to be a Class A one.
But it's not, it wasn't a Class A, that was never identified in our plan. So,
So the red marking on it is a mistake.
no, the red marking is this wetland. So on their plan,
Where did I see? I thought I just saw
This
that
is
was
the
all red.
red, and then the incidental is over here and there's no marking on our, we
Yeah,
didn't have any inventory for that. We went to inventory, that would have been. Yep, so that red one, the little one that you see
that's
there
wetland too.
is wetland 2, and wetland 1 is the one that's considered incidental.
Yeah, and the red on the left of that map, the buffer is, that's what they're eating into, to the left. that
The
red.
big wetland
Yeah.
that wraps around there. Okay.
So can I jump into, I'm wondering if we could, Corey, I don't know if Nicole talked with you about, and Pam, I don't know if this would help some of your concerns, but if we worked with Bill and Matt, our natural resource specialists, and looked at some ways to improve some of the existing buffer, I don't know. I mean, I know they're classified as manage A, but maybe there's some room for improvements. And maybe that's something we could work with you guys on, Corey, and obviously improve upon what's out there a little bit more. Would that
Absolutely.
help, Pam? Okay.
We'd be more than willing to do that. Like I mentioned before, it is kind of a tricky site, and without kind of a site visit to see what's there, it is kind of hard to describe. But if we want to look at trying to improve what we do have there, we're all about that. What we kind of presented here, we do think is the best path forward, but we're up for suggestions to improving what we are doing as well.
And that gets back to my question about timing. why does it have to be done tonight and we can't put it over till next month?
The reason is that our truck loading is currently not in a working stage. So we're focusing on trying to get that up and going so that we can get our volume requirements that we for the winter, so that we can supply the folks with Maplewood with this propane if we hit a polar vortex this winter.
I didn't think that was under consideration, the loading area. I thought it was just the incidental pond, wetland 3. Is that part of this permit, is the loading area for wetland 1? I thought that was already approved.
No, just, so the only that's a WACA, just a wetland delineation
Yeah,
approval that was
okay.
already done.
So this incorporates both the
Yeah.
loading and,
That's
thank
correct.
you.
Yep. If we were to hold it over, what we would need to identify what information or what would we need to move forward, or if we can do a conditional approval.
I wanted to ask about a conditional approval, if there's an amendment that we can add, or at least a special revision that we could add to where we say, please go and present plans to improve the buffer / the rest of it. Or whatever, however we word it, but it seems like, Corey, so you're trying to get this started quickly before winter? I don't.
Correct. We want to do, so yeah, to reiterate, the only work we're trying to get done yet this year is that truck loading, and thank you for correcting me, that is on the northeast side of the property. The larger catch basin pond that is on the northeast side of the property, we're not going to be doing anything with that until next year. So yes, but to submit this as a whole for our whole CUP permit and all the other permits we got to gather, we wanted to do all the site grading and the SWIP permit as one to show the improvements that we're doing to the entire site in general. So to answer your question, yes, the only thing we're trying to accomplish at this year is that truck loading, and that is in the northeast side of the drawing.
We do a conditional approval for the truck loading mechanism and then ask them to come back and look at the area that actually disturbs the buffer.
I like that.
That's fair. Corey, are you okay with that if we conditionally approve for further discussion on the buffer disturbance?
I am, yep.
Good job.
So move to conditionally approve the permit for the loading bay. Oh, I'm gonna butcher this. Tina, help me.
I know,
Or Lauren, help me, somebody else. I don't see it.
I don't know how to parse out the plan. Or if we can just say, there's 2 disturbance areas, one on the northwest, one on the northeast, and that this permit approval is for the northeast corner. Lauren, does that work, or is that?
Yeah, that's fine. So essentially, am I right in that it's the variance that's being denied because that's the buffer disturbance?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So I
We
do-
would split it.
Yeah, I think they'd want to defer on the variance for now.
So I think what should happen, I think essentially this should be split into 2 permits effectively. I think the variance request should be tabled at this time, pending further information. And then the other aspect, however you want to word it, can be approved tonight.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if splitting is the right word, but if they deny or table the variance request, that essentially limits their approval to just the part that's outside of the buffer.
Yes,
Correct, yeah.
that's right.
I could live with that.
So then we're moving to table the buffer,
Variance,
the variance
And
and
approve the
approve
rest.
The permit, essentially.
I'll second that.
I can live with that.
Do we have the wording down?
I think so.
Okay,
I might confer with
Good thing we're
Lauren.
recording. Yes.
Yeah.
okay, all right, that sounds good, actually. Okay, any further discussion? We have a motion and approval. Okay, roll call.
Okay, Pam,
Aye.
Val,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
and Mary.
Aye.
Good discussion. Thank you, Corey, for jumping in.
Good, yeah, thank you, Corey. Very interesting. I wouldn't want to sit here and find out that we had a polar vortex and we weren't able to load trucks.
I'll just mention as a point of procedure on the tabling, it'll need to be reconsidered within 60 days, otherwise it's deemed approved. So we'll need to make sure that whatever information is needed is presented at the next meeting for your consideration.
So,
Or is there there's extensions as well, right? So if
Yes.
the applicant were to grant an extension, if
Yes.
we need to, we could. Okay.
so at the next meeting, it should be on the agenda as an item to move forward and not.
Or an extension.
An extension, yeah.
Good
Okay,
question, no urgency.
thank you,
Okay.
Lauren.
Okay. And now we lost my third. We have
Enforcement action.
yeah, we have enforcement actions act, enforcement action report. Well, is not here, any
No.
questions?
Mary, you got anything to add?
No, I don't think so. As you can see in the enforcement report, there were a lot more non-compliance this month. Just with those heavy rain events, we had a bit of sites that couldn't keep up, but for the most part, I've made my rounds and everyone's gotten back in compliance. So we should be good to go.
And that was my question, because the reports we had from August 17th is they were grossly not in compliance. So you've been back since then, and the things you noted are fixed?
Yeah, I've either been back or I've required proof through photos and documents from site contacts to show me that they've made necessary improvements to all of those non-compliant sites.
Thank you.
And there's your McDonald's.
Yeah. Good catch, man.
And exactly the same question.
That's a lot
Why are
of.
we
lunches.
doing
That's what you're doing the math on how many
Why would
lunches
we
you're
give
getting.
McDonald's $10,000 for heaven's sakes? Okay, now we have the stewardship grant program. Seem to be doing pretty well with budget. We spent about 75% of it. No new applications, I take it.
No, it's been pretty quiet and I don't know what that's a factor of. You know, contractors are extremely busy. I know people have been trying to get bids, but contractors are just swamped. We're also seeing, as with everything, costs are a lot higher. So a lot of people have plans done, maybe even from last year where they had cost estimates and they're coming in a lot higher. So they're choosing to wait. So yeah, but the projects that are wrapping up are looking good. We started work on the Lake Owasso shoreline restorations with Land Bridge. So they're underway. There's 4 consecutive homes. So they started there and those are looking great. So excited to see how those wrap up. Yeah.
Paige, my question's related to budget. It seems like we're under budget every year. Can't remember exactly, and I'm trying to keep our levy down. Should we budget for less next year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know one thing we're looking at using our funds for, because we do, I want to spend our money, is looking at how we can offer these to cities for street sweeping. So increase street sweeping. So that's, there's a little blurb update in here. So that's something that we're looking at, maybe a pilot program for this year. I don't know if that'll be ready to bring to the board or not this season, but for sure for next year. So that would, I think, use up a lot of those funds depending on how we decide to go forward with that.
I think it's always pretty variable too. I think last year, I think we were right up to the, almost to spending it all, and this year we're not, but we do care. So I do carry over, right? So even if we don't spend $1 million, we're levying less because of that, because we're carrying that money over. Yeah, so, yeah.
Can I ask a quick, just maybe this is clear, so I was looking at the budget as well, and I think we spent only 140 year to date. And then I see this one at the, we've allocated a certain amount. Are we gonna end up spending it within this calendar year, or is it okay to spend?
No, so it's allocated in this calendar year, but 2 years to complete
2
their
years,
project.
okay.
Is that right? Paige, 2
Yeah,
years?
typically 1 year, and then there is, sometimes I would say there's a lot of carryover to that second year too.
Okay, yeah, and that's what I was kind of curious about. I was looking at those two deltas with the 140 spend year to date, and this one, I was curious how that carryover works with the rest of them.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, now we have the attorney report. Lauren?
I think I was after the budget meeting in the agenda, but I can go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Larry's trying to accelerate us.
I'm trying to make up for
That's
the
a pretty
meeting
big
where I
one to
forgot
miss there, Larry.
Okay, good, fine, okay. Budget meeting.
Yes, so today we do have a public hearing, so I think you should open the hearing, correct, Lauren, first?
Yeah, I
and
was
then-
just wondering the protocol we're gonna go through before we discuss the budget.
Or do I give my presentation first and then open the hearing?
Should we open the public hearing to start this discussion?
Yes, open it first.
Okay. We will open the public hearing on the 2023 preliminary budget and levy.
We do have a
Yeah, I
gavel.
gotta
We
find
gotta
it.
get that gavel.
Yeah.
Where's Marge? She had a gavel.
Yeah. It's in the
It's in the
drawer.
drawer over there, I know.
Needed on these.
Didn't want to scare anybody.
I do have a presentation that I'll go through and share my screen here. I'm gonna. Oops. So it's not here already. Okay, let's start. You've all seen this data from last month. There was just one small change that I made as we discussed at the last meeting, but I do have some other information to show you as well. So this shows an overview of this is the spoiler alert, right? This is the end story. Last month you saw like a 12% increase. I brought it down to 7 for the preliminary levy. As we've discussed numerous times, that can change and go even lower for December, but based on the carryover, other decisions that you make moving forward. But this is what I have proposed for today. Just some overview of how those budget numbers, and this is budget, not levy, but how those budget numbers, let me see when my arrows got tweaked, that should come down to this blue one here. This splits it up by program area, so you can see how we spend our money based on implementation versus administration, salaries, benefits, and then various program areas. Also, see, I'm missing some percentages. Sorry, I don't know why those changed when I copy and pasted that over, but just kind of gives an overview of where the dollars are going. This is another way to look at it. This is based on our plan goals. So our six main goals of our watershed district. Again, I break everything down into one, some of the budget line items are 30% flood, 30% water quality, different percentages, but I go through each one and allocate it to one of our plan goals. So you can get an idea for how that budget is being spent or being looked at.
I would just comment that even though all my peeps are dead now, that we're poor and homeowners. And I just always look like if we're going to, like, Diane suggesting, if we're going to increase our levy by a substantial amount, I'm always concerned about those, poor people living in homes and, $60 can impact them. It really can. An increase of $20 can impact them. And that's why I'm always hopeful that we can keep our levy the same and or raise it slowly and be aware of that. So not that this is too big of a concern, but that would be concerning.
Yeah, I think in general, I agree with that, but I started to look at what other people are doing.
Mhm.
Of course, the outlier right now is St. Paul at 15%. 7% is about in the range that most people have. A little less would probably be better, but we're all going to get whacked with big increases in our property taxes. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have pretty high inflation.
Yeah.
And that some of these things that we want to do will be hard to do without raising a little money. Part of it is, do we raise a little bit this year and a little bit next year and a little bit next year? Or do we wait till we really need it and whomp them with a big one like they're trying to do in St. Paul with 15%? So I think we're kind of in that framework right now from my point of view. But I take what you say. I understand that. I get big property taxes too.
I'm not as worried about being lumped with a big levy increase because of our time frame in planning and experience in planning. We do our studies, we get our estimates, we kind of work options. And if we ever have the really huge projects, we can bond our partners. What I like is what Tina's doing, which is drilling down into the detail of each line item and having a realistic budget with, we have extra for flooding and other areas, and we need that in case something does come up. But we've managed really well, and everybody's taxes are going up because their property values, not just levy increases. So I want to keep doing that balance. We gotta have enough, but I want to keep it realistic.
Yeah, that's, just jump ahead to this table, you'll see that the percentage of that, we decreased our percentage of everybody's taxes, percentage has decreased, but the market value has increased so much.
Are those years right on that chart?
I wrote that note too.
No, probably not. No, that should say 23 and 22. Sorry about that.
I was smart enough to
I
figure
got
it
it
out
up
for myself.
above.
Thank you, but,
I got it up above, but missed it on the
Yeah.
table, you're right. So
Let's just correct that in the minutes for the next.
yeah, I'll make that change so that when it's on the website, it's changed.
Well, because we'll still go over carryover and all that stuff as the year
Right.
comes to a one,
Right.
like come
Right.
down. So,
That's the advantage we have over someone like St. Paul that
yeah.
is not allowed to carry.
Yeah, I think, and again, we get to that point where we wanna maybe plan for a little bit bigger increase in September, but then we can drill down even more through December. We wouldn't wanna go the other way, start at 0 and then decide we needed to increase.
Right, especially when you have to notify so many cities and other entities.
Right.
If you start high, you'll be pleasantly surprised if it comes in less. Unlike what usually happens to us as we get our property tax bill and we're unpleasantly surprised by the fact, gosh,
And it gives us the flexibility with seeing how the numbers come in at the end of the year.
and where inflation is going to go. And
Right.
what
The
we're
condition,
sensing
yeah.
for what people may come back with. Like we've been pretty lucky for the past couple, 3 years with Fitzgerald Engineering coming in with the CIPs under expectations. They may not be able to do that.
Right.
Or and if they don't, we still have to do the CIP, so.
And
we
there
have the
are
money.
areas that are going up and, salaries, and we don't, still don't have the salary survey yet.
Right.
Those are, that's the big one we've been talking about.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of places where I put in a little extra just to cover those
Yeah.
concerns or those, just to keep an eye on some of those things like the, project maintenance, repair, just making sure that we have enough in there to cover.
Do you remind me, do you have feedback on things like insurance costs and things? Because I know my insurance costs went right through the roof.
We don't, health insurance, we do not have rates yet, so that is something else, and I always factor in a pretty healthy increase in our salary and benefits for that purpose. But we don't get those until October, end of October, so. But we will know that, as we go on in the year. So that, just to show you the capital improvements budget items, they're the same items, and we discussed the double driveway a lot at the last meeting and how to handle that with the levy. That was, it's a brand new project, there's no carryover or anything, so that's that was a $675,000 levy option for in August when we saw it. I split it into half levy, half carryover meaning we have to move those funds from our capital improvement contingency fund or so that would that's what essentially brought that levy down to the 7%. We did also discuss taking it all from that contingency fund, which would bring that levy down even further. Then there was other discussion last month about having money there available for potential land acquisition or other opportunities in the future.
The inspection tool, more data that you have, you might identify other areas to attack.
Right.
The double-edged sword of having more data.
Okay, I move approving the draft budget for purposes of preliminary levy and approve resolution 2201. Did I do that right in the right spot? No, am I in the wrong spot?
I think we have to make sure there's no public
We have to have public
comments.
comments. Sorry, it's okay. Yeah.
And then close the hearing,
Right, have to close the hearing. So is there any other comments before we move to close the hearing? And you saw I do the same,
Yeah, some of the typos that she already cut.
yeah.
Oh, don't apologize.
Okay, so any comments from the public about the?
You're it.
You don't have anything to say?
They have
Okay,
different hands.
Yeah.
with that, we will close the public hearing. And do I have a motion?
I remove to approve the draft budget for purposes of preliminary levy and approve the resolution 2201.
Yeah, this is a resolution. Right? Go ahead.
Moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded. Okay, any further discussion on the resolution?
Thanks for hearing our feedback.
Yeah. Okay, roll call, please.
Yeah.
Aye.
Val.
Aye.
And Larry.
Okay, good discussion.
Print this page too, so make sure I get your signatures.
Okay, for the one thing, just as a side note on the budget too, when I read through all the projects and things, there's a lot of stuff that's like right on the cusp of having something done with it, so
It's coming.
it'll be exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Now,
Is it time?
it's time. Attorney report, Lauren.
All right, so just a brief report. This month, we made sure the public notices were published for that hearing you just held. So like a lot of the public notices, they run for 2 consecutive weeks. So it ran August 17th and 24th. That was our big item to make sure is accomplished, but well in advance of this meeting. And then otherwise, we've just been working on some contract documents for various projects and a stewardship grant application. So that's my report.
Okay. Any further feedback on the issue of appointing board members that we talked about the last time? Anything had to do with that? We're not getting any
No,
guidance on a mod, I can tell you that.
I was gonna say, no feedback that's been constructive or helpful. Determining what, there's been a lot of questions, especially for the other districts we represent, that are open, they're reapplying right now. And so it's kind of this delicate balance of, we don't represent the cities, but we want to make sure the cities are aware of this ruling. So no, to your question, we haven't gotten any further instruction.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, thank you. Board issues, anybody have any additions, subtractions to the log? And we talked at the last meeting a little bit about what that log is for, which should be in there. We deferred a lot of things to your administrators of the board. There are certain things that we have the programs and projects, thank you, list. We have your administrators list, stuff that goes in the action log. And Val, that was kind of your suggestion to have that. So that's stuff that we just talk about and we want to have something done. Because there are some pretty interesting things in the law right now.
And I was looking at that too. I appreciated it's coming up in the fall. I was curious if there was prep work and stuff that needed for those discussions. I didn't have any other comments. I like the content.
Okay. Do you have any comments?
Nope.
Okay, all right. So we're all good to go with that.
Is this in the point where we'll talk about the Minnesota drainage, or that's at the end of the board issues?
We talk about Minnesota drainage. It is a board issue, yes, so
Yeah.
We'll just add that to it. You probably against the law, but we'll do it.
Did somebody read, did others read that report? I read it through and I think I understood where it was going, but then it made me question. I mean, it seems like you would naturally go through the effort of trying to understand the downstream impacts of the changes.
I think, can you say the report and how, so I'm making sure that I have it available to the.
Says it's
They sent us an email.
They sent an email.
Yeah.
It's prepared at request of Minnesota Drainage Working Group. It's called the Modernized Public Notice for Drainage Projects and Major Repairs. Statement of the situation to be addressed for the Drainage Working Group. And so it seems to me to be kind of a proposed set of work for this drainage group that I'm personally, frankly, I'm not familiar with. And so when I read it through, this was a public notice, I believe, where it was saying, hey, this is something we're considering doing. And there were there are three things that I read in it that gave me a bit of a pause and thought it would be worthwhile either setting up for a future discussion or understanding further. But from looking at this, they, and I'm going to generalize it, they want to, this working group sits between large changes and looks to see if that change has a meaningful impact on downstream properties, watersheds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems additional to some of the processes and procedures that we've put in place to understand downstream impact. And so I was curious about if that's extra overhead or what the limits were for this proposal.
So just to give a little bit of background, because I'm not super familiar with how the drainage work group, I know that we have MOD representatives that attend to advocate for us. It's part of the legislative process. And so I think where this is coming from, hopefully I'm not speaking out of line, but that there was legislation proposed that was a major concern to the drainage authorities in the state of Minnesota.
Okay.
And the legislation, I think would, in the opinion of MOD, would delay the maintenance needs in ditch work. that could then impact property owners. So I think what the drainage work group then is considering is what would be sufficient or a good change to that legislation. That's about all I know about it. I'd have to do some more research to see.
I don't know how long this public notice, so it was proposed 8/31/22. I assume it has to sit open for.
It's not this isn't a public notice in and of
Okay.
itself. It's
Okay.
discussing the public notice requirements for drainage law. So it's,
It just caught me by surprise and I read it and it was like, oh, hey, if repairs are needed, the funds are gonna come from somewhere, and it didn't say where funds were coming from, and I was just like kind of at a loss. I wrote that I think there's more information required to.
yeah, so the drainage work group is asked to discuss the need to modernize our public notice and also transparency, efficiency. There's those 3 bullet points. So the drainage work group meets maybe even monthly. And they would then give recommendations to the legislative process, so.
So should we put it on next month's agenda, knowing more about it, or?
I, to be honest, I don't know if we should care about it, and so that's where I was struggling.
That's a good question.
I,
And it went to all of our inboxes, and so there were a couple of test documents, I was like, okay, well, I read it through real quick, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
so we don't manage ditches.
Right.
We have creeks that are not the same. So we don't fall under that same.
May I ask you some
Category.
clarify, so we're doing ditch 17 work currently, right?
It's labeled ditch 17.
Okay, it's just, but it's a
yes.
creek.
But we've allocated that, like ditch authority, I guess, to our city and county partners. It's a little different in the metro area. This does not, certainly applies to the non-metro areas, and it's part of their everyday operation is ditch maintenance. But if you want to put it on the next month's, I can provide a little more context maybe around
Maybe just.
how it does or doesn't apply to us.
Because we all did get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be super, like, even if it's just a paragraph in your administrative report,
Yeah,
just,
just a summary.
I'd be very happy. I don't
We
think,
all got this is what.
and I made the mistake of reading all the stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Well, I understood.
And I'll have, yes, and I will get some,
And my thought was Tina will guide us.
Yeah.
That's what I was hoping, and I'll bring it.
yes, I will get some information that I can share back to you about it.
And we do have a ditch 17 or 16 too.
You
know that.
I know that one very well.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I saw it.
So we do have a few that are still labeled that way. Some of our creeks are ditches too as well.
Yeah,
Or had been previously.
thank you for the tangent. I just.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and we also have the board member roles and responsibilities. You asked for that, so you discussion.
I guess, yes, I would suggest I think Diane and I both were very interested in understanding it. And it's more of maybe a workshop type of activity where we clarify, so we have the president, we have a secretary, we have the treasurer, right? And just really fully getting a sense where we want to understand the role and the guardrails for that role, and making sure that we know what to do. So I get a sense of what stepping into. This is partly me trying to understand the treasurer role.
Yeah.
I knew the budgeting process last year, and second time around this year made me curious. Okay, should I be taking a more active discussion with you prior to it coming up, or like from a secretary standpoint, are they responsible for board level things that we need to think about later? Or so it just made me, and I read through the watershed plan previously, and there's some high level language in there, but I'm more of a stickler for a bit of details and more defined guardrails.
So it is on my goals for this year to define those roles and have governance manual,
Yeah.
put together. So that is something that's in progress. So there is a time, I would say in the next 3 months, that you'll see that come forward for discussion, and then we can talk about.
Well, and we can, I guess the other part too, it'd be great to see some in the next 3 months. I think that's a fine timeline, but we could also actively participate. And there are tools like a role mandate. There's a bunch of different, organizational ways to resolve and clear what's, what is owned, what should be influenced, what's not. So I'm happy if that's where we end up going. If you want active participation here, it could be you present and we provide feedback, or we could actively help define it. It really is what's the most efficient use of time and fastest way of getting to the answer. That's whichever you prefer.
And Tina, you were looking at what some of the other districts have already done, what work they've already done on this.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We also had discussed this before a little bit about there's a difference between the watersheds that don't have a large staff like we do.
Yeah.
And so the board members have to serve a more active role. So, but that's what we need to find is our own watershed.
But so I went and Googled it a little bit on different watersheds, and to be honest, it's all what I saw. And so I was more of, okay, we've set the standard in other areas. Can we say with our organization, this is how we're doing it?
Yep, in the works.
Okay.
And yes,
It's on her
You
performance.
want me to stop badgering you?
No,
I'll
no,
stop.
I don't consider that magic at all.
No.
I think that your point is well taken too about back and forth versus just here it is. And
I'm comfortable with that way. I think that's a perfectly reasonable way of doing it. I was trying to figure out, obviously there's several people on the board who are opinionated, and maybe it might be faster to help with,
well,
which we appreciate, right? But
I think what I would appreciate from the board is if you're seeing that there's gaps or there's a problem with how it's operating, if you see that there would be, there's something that you want to see change, then that would be good to know.
Okay.
Discussion. All righty. Your reports and presentations?
Goodness.
Administrators report, this could be the most interesting one of the night.
Yeah, so we have some, do you want me to walk through them, or do you have any questions, or, but at least for the ongoing in the meetings, and if there's anything of note that you want to add.
Yeah.
Oh, the tour, I guess we should talk about that.
On the ponds of Paddock Creek,
Yeah,
we are setting up, is that Ann White Eagle that you're talking to?
so I talked to Ann White Eagle, but that's not who the contact person is. So Ann got me the contact person,
Okay.
and she is in the property management section of Ramsey County. And her name is escaping me right now, but I can get that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But Ann is involved in that conversation, and she's the one that, I did talk with Ann about their interest also from the Soil and Water Division of Ramsey County to protect those BMPs in perpetuity. So there is some good movement at least to talk about a shared interest.
So did we talk to Maplewood, are they still involved in this
It
conversation?
sounds like Maplewood has kind of backed away from their interest in that at this time.
Okay,
So when I haven't met with the property management person yet, but I'll have that discussion with her as well.
okay. Have we talked to any NGOs?
Not at this point, I have not.
Okay,
One of my first, I think, if Ramsey County was willing to put the natural areas into conservation easements or into protected class, and we would help maintain or be part of that process, that would probably be the most ideal from a fiscal and natural habitat protection standpoint. So I haven't gone down the NGO road yet.
That might just by itself,
Yeah.
or you can see if we need to add more
Right.
partners.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's always money around there to do something. We don't have to necessarily finance it, but it'd be, as long as we're showing interest in maintaining those wetland areas.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I would consider the first priority is if we can keep those buffers and wetland natural areas in that state. Obviously, that would be the primary or the first goal, I should say. But then we can continue to talk about further protection of the land if that's
Okay. That could be an interesting one. Okay. And the boundary change we have on the documents, is that where we're at?
Yep, so we've been
Defining
defining the
what we're actually
boundary.
buying, yes.
Yeah, so you have to, kind of look at it parcel by parcel to make sure that it's appropriate, which way. So we're doing that, and we're working with Palamo and BAR as far as the hydrologic boundary to make sure that we can align the political boundaries closely to the hydrologic. So once that's completed, then I can send the documents to Palamo and Venice Heights for their review and approval. And then we'll see how it's-
And we have when we might be done with this, or
if you see it in October, I would guess, I can't remember now, was it 50 days or 40 days that Bowser had to act on it? So I would guess by the end of the year we'd be completed.
Forgive me if I missed this, but is there a public notice for boundary change stuff if this?
There is, Bowser does the public
Okay,
notice.
So that's part of the 50
So
days.
once they receive it, then they would put it on public notice.
fascinating process to go through. I see they're gonna build a big apartment building on the corner of Hudson 694 too, which is interesting. All those people that bought in the McMillan building with their balconies overlooking the lake, they're now gonna overlook another apartment building.
Yeah, that permitting or that project was where some of the concern from the city of Venice Heights was they wanted to make sure that whatever we did wouldn't stop that development
Stop
from
it, no.
happening. But I think it was not really ours to deal with at the time. So.
Okay, board tour?
Yeah, so I guess first question is conflicts with any of those weeks.
I have 2 dates. Oh, you have 1/19th?
Yeah, that whole.
The whole
week.
week. The whole week. So the week of the 26th, is that?
Okay, so you've already ruled out the whole first week. The second week you gave us Wednesday, the 28th is not good for me.
Okay.
I could do potentially Monday, the 19th.
How about timing?
I'm gonna monitor it again. I have my Mondays back.
Okay.
My
what's the
business days
earliest?
are pretty freaking full, so, and you work during the day too usually, so for me, like a 5 PM start time, so we still have daylight, I could do.
Okay,
Does that work for you?
I would recommend that. 5:30.
okay, yep. Sounds good. That's why I was looking for just the earliest that you could meet, so we can, like you said, get as much daylight as possible. Sounds good.
Do you know where we're going?
I have the list that we discussed last month, but I haven't mapped it out yet.
It's like per usual, I request it's like an hour and 45 minutes max.
Couple of minutes.
Not 3 hours. It's long.
And we'll, since it's like a 5 PM start, we'll probably plan for like a box dinner as well.
Is there any possibility of getting into the plant?
Not for this tour. That would take the whole time, and the timing isn't good. It's gotta be cold.
Try Trust me,
frozen.
when they do allow us in, go. That's
I-
like the funnest one we've ever
I
done.
know, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
And they might even, like Brad might give you a spray can and let you write your name on it. Could happen, could happen.
It could have.
Or you might see that some people did that.
Okay. Can you send us an email reminding us of the date?
Yes, I will pick the
I guess you have
dates.
to check with Matt too.
I do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll check on the dates and then send that out as soon as possible. And then get them. Good. The mod items for discussion, there's a number of them. First, the summer tour that I attended. You know, as I said, it's always good, especially because it's been a while since we've been in person to you know, see some connections and have discussion. We had a really good administrators meeting on that first day. And learned a lot about the Red River, you know, area. It was very similar to the tour in 2019 when
Yeah.
Larry was on that tour. Pam, you were
So
there
it's
too.
been-
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it was very similar. We saw some very similar EMPs, impoundment areas, large places where they both, you know, hold back water for flood events, but as well as have some wildlife and natural habitat. All those, and then the presentations, you should have received that email as well. And there was links to all those presentations if you're interested in those. The second item was the membership dues.
But before we get
Okay.
quite to that, was there any talk about what's going on with the one right now?
At the, well,
Well, I
Officially, or-
think everybody seems to have disappeared.
right, so at
Except for
the, so the
Jan.
mod, unfortunately, the mod board meeting was at the same time as the administrators meeting. But I was informed that at the mod board meeting, they did appoint Jan Boyd as the interim executive director. They could not come to an agreement on position description and hiring plans for the new executive director, so that was pushed off. Then there was I think you received these emails as well, but a smattering of resignations and from the mod board at various points. One is happening already, and then one at the end of the year at the annual meeting. She's not going to reappoint or re-up. So there is some opportunity to have some change on that mod board too. And there will be Region 3 representative. If anyone's interested in being on the mod board, there will be an opportunity. Well, there would be anyway, because it's just the election time anyway, but I believe then there would be 2 of the 3 seats from Region 3 available for election at the annual meeting in December. I think that there's a lot of ties to the strategic plan as far as what's going to happen next or how MOD's going to move forward. So there's a lot of hope around, you know, that there's some good ideas as for how to be a better organization moving forward. But it also is going to take a lot of staff hours, and
You know,
you're going to need an executive director to do that. Jan, so for Jan's history, she was the administrator at Heron Lake Watershed District for 38 years and had recently retired, and then was brought on by Emily, the former executive director, to assist, basically to be a consultant and help with some of the projects that MOD had going on, needed a little more staff time. And now she's interim executive director. So
Yeah.
it's not a job that she won't, that's not her.
She doesn't want that.
No, she's not. She's just here until they can get themselves situated, so.
Metro Mod's the same way too, like Mark and Mary just like, not gonna do this anymore.
Did Mark say that at the meeting?
Oh, yeah.
I talked to him about it too. He's looking for a volunteer to lead the Metro Mod meetings. Actually, I think somebody at 9 Mile or Riley Purgatory previously not doing it, but yeah, a lot of changes, I think, which is not a bad thing, so.
So under the annual.
Onto the dues, I mean, the real one, I mean, we talked about, or the mod has talked about changing the due structure for a long time. There's a formula, we've gone back and forth on how to do this. The real problem, or the real, I guess, problem that they're trying to find a solution for is that many of the non-metro watershed districts have a $250,000 cap on their administrative budgets. And so whether you know, and we don't, right? So we have a $4 million general fund budget.
Oh, on a tour, side note, on a summer tour once, a bunch of women from the north, they just laid into me on that one summer tour, and I was like, what?
It's not my fault.
I was trying my best to
I
explain.
didn't write the rules. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been at the top of MOD's legislative priority for years to try and get that cap either lifted or changed or increased. It's never, it hasn't increased in, I don't know, 25 years or something. But it's a difficult sell for the out of the metro area to increase taxes, or even a perceived increase in taxes. So that was some of the membership of MOD was saying, well, why should we pay the same cap as somebody who doesn't have that, or pay the same MOD dues cap as some of the watersheds that don't have as limited of a budget. So they didn't change the formula, but they changed the capping.
So I'm going to try to say this delicately. So I read through the strategic plan.
Yeah.
And is there sufficient return on investment with dues increase given a new shift in strategy?
So I think that is yes. What I was starting to say no to was that we don't have the money to implement that strategic plan.
Oh, well, so that was going to be follow-up.
They get quite a bit of money from the events is what I heard.
Some of their budget is
Off of the events.
off the events. Right.
Which they haven't been able to do, so
Right.
it's sort of dry.
Yeah. So a certain percent of their budget does come from that, but right now their
I saw the
budget
same thing.
is
Would
limited.
this actually support a half of an executive director?
Would it support that? Given their current history and track record, does it merit the increase, or absolutely need the increase given some of the experiences others have had?
So it's a reallocation too. So, their budget's their budget, and then their due structure covers
they're
that
just
budget,
choosing
right?
to shift it around.
So we pay a little
like
more and some others will pay a little less. So it's not an increase in their budget per se, but in our dues to the organization. Now, whether or not you could dollar for dollar say that we would receive that benefit, probably not. I mean, I don't know that I could identify that, but
Well, and I thought about that too. First of all, with all due respect to the rest of the stuff we spend our money on, $12,000 isn't that much. But to get more inclusivity, for these watershed districts that just aren't in it anymore because they don't feel they're getting value. Have a way to bring them in so that it's financially viable. I think that's the most important.
yeah, I think so too. I think we benefit from having a strong association. And if we need to do a little more, like you said, to help others be part of that organization, then I would agree with that.
I just trying to come up to speed quicker on the mod stuff and looking at the strategic direction. I just was like, I understand the budget's the budget. I was like, okay, well, I didn't want to. It felt like the money could be utilized elsewhere in different ways. But if it does encourage this, and they get to at least a couple of the goals that I have comments on, that'd be fine.
That'll depend on the board and the executive director.
I know, so we're gonna put up an extra amount of money.
At least the goals are there.
Yeah.
I do agree with that.
Yeah, I think this is minor compared to what it might take if they seriously want to implement that strategic plan. there will have to be they'll have to have some hard conversations around how to get there and
Which
who
ones do you
pays for that.
prioritize?
Yeah.
So they basically were okay. Actually, it was a pretty interesting document to read because it was a good discussion of all the things that they considered going through this, and what they ended up with seemed to be about as equitable as it is.
I think so.
I could imagine it is, and the fact that some watershed districts are not, or watershed organizations are not participating, I think is unfortunate. If there's a way to solve that, I think that's the right thing to do. And if the new structure allows that to happen, good.
So, I agree.
Okay.
And now we go on to the more interesting part, the proposed
Strategic
alleged
plan.
strategic plan, which is not actually a strategic plan, but. that's
Yeah.
okay.
I think ultimately,
I hope that-
it's not- yeah, this is true.
I know, you and I come from organizations where
Yeah.
it's in our blood, and we should try to get over that.
I think ultimately, what Maude would like is a comment letter. It can be really detailed, or it can just be, yes, we support. Something that the Maude board then can have from as many organizations as part of the membership as possible.
And in general, reading through it, one of the things I think that they ought to do, and I didn't do it because somebody else made the plan, was there's a mix between sort of strategy things and short-term tactics. There's a lot of stuff that they have in there that's one and done and out, doesn't need to be a strategic plan. The other, well, there are two other major comments that I had. And one was that I was really happy to see, as I'm sure you are, that there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot of direction in there about working with Mala, which has not been the case before. So that's a good recognition. But the other thing is that every time I look for something to be done, the president, the vice president, the treasurer were having to do it. So who would want to be president of the, you'd be going to meetings every day of the week to do that. So I think they need to look a little bit more about delegating things and how they do that, so they don't overwork their officers.
I think that's a little bit of a overlap, or like, that's the history of the Maude board, is that they did everything. And they,
Yeah,
you know, we even, well, it's not really before we had an executive director, but even with the executive director, that was part of the problem, is that the board was still doing the job of the executive director. But I think you're right, a different structure for that is.
They talked about the exactly what's called, like the treasury committee managing the day-to-day finances.
Yeah.
You know, like that isn't, that's why you have an executive director and a staff person.
Yeah.
Well, and you can tie it to their values, which the proposed one is one about collaboration.
Yeah.
Which is not only between the districts, but pulling people in to do that kind of stuff, because they have a lot of definition that they need to add to this. The vision isn't real clear, but they've got some wishful kind of good thinking with the more member driven, more collaborative, more transparent. If they can just add some meat on those bones, I think we should give them a general nod of support of some kind. And encourage them to take this to the next steps that needs to be there. I mean, I put down my red pen, that is my conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And from what I sort of read, that the loss of Emily at a crucial point was probably not a good thing.
This is correct.
You know, across all these districts, there's a lot of experienced people that they could tap if they really want to collaborate. break down the work into bite-sized pieces, they could get a lot of good stuff done. And I especially liked it with, not just saying we're about lobbying, it's more about influence in all the different ways.
Yeah.
I want to build on that because when I looked at, when you were giving your rationale, Larry, and what you said, Diane, I looked at the executive committees, you start in my mind, they reflect kind of the direction. And one of the things that I wrote that I'd like to see is if they're truthfully going for transparency and interaction, should there be, like, is the personnel committee going to be focused on training, communication, joining central, like the committees formed are blocking and tackling committees. There isn't one that's unique to actually help drive the initiatives that seem to be at the root of the problem. So that was probably a change that I would recommend or suggest saying. But I agree with the rest of the general comments that it's directionally correct. It's not a measurable, actionable exactly strategy plan.
Yeah.
It is a good first step. It's good to see him do this. It needs some refinement. Like I say, there's some short-term things in there that are going to be one and done. And somebody is there to do them. But
Yeah.
I'm going to figure out how to get an executive director.
Yeah. That would be
Which is undefined.
Empower MW to accomplish its goals and objectives, sufficient staffing. Yeah, you need to hire some people.
Yeah.
That is an action.
people. Are you comfortable with me writing a letter? With
General
those
support.
comments, yeah, general support.
I'm very interested by goal 3. I think I brought this up informally to you, Tina, on the what reads to me as their desire to be the central hub of communication. That one does seem like would be a really good one to find out. I like that goal a lot, but they may be crossing over multiple other groups to accomplish things.
When I sat down, when I first was informed by Sandy Martin that there was such thing as a watershed district, and I was seeing, I looked up what is a watershed district. I got to why they explained it. So they're good for, it's one of the functions that you should have is to explain to the public what's going on. The other thing, it's a big thing we argue about every year to a certain extent, is lobbying for things. It's crucial. And the third thing is having events like this to bring the watershed districts together to cross learn. And that's sort of my strategic plan. There are the 3 things that I ought to be doing. And it is kind of reflected in there. You have to dig it out. But
I think to speak to that and to what Belle was saying about goal 3 and there's, I think as administrators, there's a real need to have a central voice, to help elevate some of our concerns with state agencies.
To help you
Or
make the
connections
connections.
and to make the connections. It's really helpful. Emily was meeting, monthly with John Jaskey at Bowser, the executive director Bowser, just to kind of keep watershed issues at the top of his mind and which benefits all. I think what I mentioned this to Val earlier too, sometimes where the issue might come with that is when it's an issue that's only pertains to a certain watershed or certain small group of watersheds, and then how does MOD can't speak for all, but do they advocate for little? So there is some of that.
Or they can teach how to advocate, right?
Right.
I was curious if the goal 1 through 3, when you number anything, it sets an informal prioritization. And so I was like, that one in my head stood out as like, that's a good crucial.
and we always have that tension. We always have that tension between what we call out state, which is in return.
Metro, non-metro
And the
areas.
metro area, totally different needs political power is outstaying, I get that. People have to manage a lot of water. But that's actually a good purpose for MOD, is to provide a forum for those two competing entities to get together and talk about that.
Exactly.
And I'm please write a letter. Do you need a motion to do that, or do we just say?
It might
They
help
ask
just,
for a motion.
yeah, I think it would
actually.
help for you
Yes.
to give a motion for the general support kind of motion, and then
With comments or something?
asking you to send a letter to Ron with your general comments.
Right. Oh, so
I should have listened better.
we have a motion.
That's a motion.
What I used to do is write down my motions before I got here.
But then things
But
change.
now I'm asking people for motions, so I don't have to do that anymore.
You can move to,
Generally support the strategic plan as written with some, improvements that could be made in its
ask, you know,
structure.
And
direct
for a
me
quick
to-
and appropriate hiring of music.
Yeah.
A competent
Yeah.
executive
you can put
director.
that in there.
Yeah, that's a critical
Yeah.
first step.
Move to write a letter of.
Support.
Oh,
You,
what she
we're
said.
good.
What
You
Tina,
can just
I
say
moved
that.
to do what Tina said,
Perfect.
With incorporating all.
with incorporating comments and.
I second.
Okay. Second to that motion?
You might say it.
We did, I do, okay. Any other further discussion? Roll call?
Diane?
Aye.
Okay, good. All right, moving along to the project and program status report. Any questions from anybody on any of those things, comments? I was glad to see that my table of lake levels is working its way forward.
It's getting
And
there.
we have a lot of stuff teed up for next month's meeting,
Yes,
that's
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Christine reports, a lot of work going on that's in progress right now. Good. Because we're working.
I'm gonna make a comment in the manager comments, but if it's this, so it's kind of like the McDonald's thing. At first I look at this and I thought, Ether X, oh my gosh, can't we organize it? This isn't very accessible to me. And then I get to this really nice report that is set out by topics. So I like the report. Thank you, Brad, too. Can we just break down the agenda for the next one, just following this form?
Yeah, so I added the number or the letters to the
Yeah.
packet now.
But what I like is the heading. We
So I
got
guess
this
you
one,
want the
piece of-
headings added to the.
Yeah, just slip them in,
To
just
this
the way the
one, right.
report is, I really,
Yeah.
really
That's fine.
like that.
Yep.
Because it helps me kind of
Yep.
tune in and,
And so a laundry
Sure.
list of everything.
yeah, because in the laundry list, I'm,
We will do that next time, yeah.
And we're running out of
it
letters.
was really good report, and that's was
Well,
my
I will
first
do
reaction, what are
double
we gonna
A's.
do?
Double A, B, double B. double
Yeah,
I guess.
yes,
Is that the
Or-
next on
or
the list?
we may not even know.
Or go to the three column,
Yeah.
if we can find that.
Or we can-
We've kind of hung around X for a while.
Yeah, let's get some stuff done. And then,
Had a really good report.
okay. We will take that. Any manager comments or anything?
Nope.
Good to go?
I have 4 comments on that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry. But I was curious on the response time feedback from the districts. Like, it said that they provided response time, or specifically they had some questions related to response time.
I'm sorry, which one were you referring
It's
to?
A.
Yeah.
It says, really specifically, they had some comments specifically related to response time in the area, flash flooding and limited resources. The numbers, I was
Yeah.
just curious if you could expand on it, or somebody could expand on it.
Yeah, Brad, do you want to speak to that or?
I think I understand your question, Val. I think there was just, there are some of these sites that The response time is a little bit longer, so there is an opportunity for sandbagging. But there are a number of the sites that are really flash flooding prone and how to deal with that. So it was just a discussion around the recognition that some of these just can't be protected. And so we are sharing some data with the cities and, in terms of hydrographs and, just having them kind of help with the decision on what to do, because again, it's kind of their responsibility to implement whatever in these plans. So we're trying to involve them in on that decision-making process, especially when it gets to those flash flooding areas.
Thank you so much. That helps clarify. When I read it, it sounded like there might have been pushback on just some of the areas, but that helps a lot. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm gonna skip the question I had with D and jump to J on the TMDL changes. Can somebody say more about, it seems like we don't have the data to actually do the assessment?
We do have the data,
okay.
But we need to use the data to assess what.
I got worried with the data storage issue thing, where it said there was a data storage issue in J, and then I was like, because that was one of those bogeys that could come and hit us if we end up not meeting the new TMDL requirements being rolled out. And so I just wanted to understand, does that mean that we have a limit amount of data, or, okay. So
I think it was just, it restricted us being able to retrieve the data, I think, Brad, is that
That we
what it said?
have.
We have.
That's my understanding, yes.
Thank you,
And then it was a blip in time, it wasn't like a long-term.
Okay, yeah, I apologize. When I read it, I was like, ooh, data corruption, that seems like that's gonna hurt us. And
well, and so what we'll be doing with that data is determining whether or not we're meeting our requirements.
And we've got quite a bit of time.
Yeah, and we've got time to do that. And then from there, then we would be looking at implementation to,
right. Like if
meet
there needs
that
to be
over time.
mitigated or.
Yeah, which would happen over a 10-year or more period of time.
I always get worried if your inputs are corrupt, or at least how And then lastly is the street sweeping. You brought it up a little earlier, that's P. There was a proposal on the study. I'm just curious if that's something, there's a presentation later this fall, but there was a really healthy discussion on street sweeping and phosphorus loads, right, if I recall correctly. I just would love to see more about that.
Yeah, we'll provide some background on that. There's presentations and reports and things that we can share that.
It was like
as
super
backgrounds.
exciting to see that things were going well, and the prioritization study and the research is going well.
Yeah, but we can provide some of that.
Yeah, so, okay. And that report's of interest to me too, because I'm interested to see what the team comes up with as a potential way of dealing with that. Because the majority and they sweep our streets like every other week.
Well, and I remember, I think it was you, Pam, who was bringing it up as a hot button item or an area of investigation of interest. And so when I dug into it, I was like, oh, that's this is pretty important thing.
Yeah, it's a whole thing.
Okay, maybe it was more of a comment than a question. Cool.
Okay, any other comments from anybody? Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we're adjourned. Don't have to vote.
All right.
Thank you all.
See y'all.
Have a good